Welcome to CDR Quick Take with CarbonX. I'm your host, Eli Harrell. In this bi-weekly report series, you will get transparency into what's happening in the CDR and carbon markets, as well as key pricing data and market trends, ensuring that you have access to the most up-to-date information to inform critical decisions. If you're responsible for making the best decisions possible with your ESG budget, this show and report are for you. If you find these reports useful, please subscribe and set notifications so that you'll see them every 2 weeks. Let's get into it. Welcome to episode 2 of CDR Quick Take with CarbonX. I'm your host, Eli, and with me today is Sebastien Dewarrat. He's the co-founder of CarbonX. Today, we're going to give you a sneak peek behind the curtain of the carbon removal industry. And in this episode, we're going to talk about pricing in the CDR market. The aim is to give an overview of the pricing data that we're seeing in the ecosystem and shed some light on what is driving pricing variations. Sebastien, can you start us out by talking about how we should think about prices in the CDR market?
Hi, Eli. It's great to be here. And absolutely. So just to give a broad overview of prices in the CDR market, I think this is generally a topic that's of interest for a lot of people, but also a very complex one to approach, mainly because the CDR market is very early and most of the transactions that are being done at the moment are in the futures. So when we approach, prices in CDR, it's very difficult to, put specific numbers on them. We generally approach them at CarbonX while looking at, ranges. And I think here, I'm just going to quickly share a few data that we have at CarbonX and that we've done by specific removal pathways. And so here you will see that, so for example, we always look at prices depending on the removal methods that is being used. And here we generally cover 4 main removal pathways: direct air capture, enhanced weathering, biomass carbon removal, and then ocean carbon removal. And within those individual, pathways, you can see that the price range are very wide. And I'm happy to, to deep dive after in some of the specifics.
Okay, this is helpful. And we'll make sure that for anybody listening in podcast where you can't see the screen, we'll give you a link to where you can just see this graphic. All right, so the next question that I want to ask is, CDR can be considered expensive compared to traditional offsets. Is that true? And what are different prices that you're seeing?
Yes, so that's also exactly a common point in the industry. The difficulty as well with that question is with CDR, we're encompassing a wide range of methods. And so that is true for a certain number of methods, but for others, and especially within the biomass CDR with biochar, we're already seeing prices that are, very affordable in the lower hundreds. And by affordable, I mean in terms of what should represent the true cost of carbon. And so, yeah, it depends on what projects and pathways we're considering. But the main point here is we're already seeing, price points in the lower hundreds.
Okay, great. And for the CDR technologies that are still expensive, what is your expectation for price decline potential?
Yeah, so that's also a question that we probably have to look at for each individual removal pathways. If we look at, I think the main goal for all of those removal pathways is to reach that $100 per ton price point. And whether we can achieve it or not will, depends especially on the timelines that we're looking at. So for example, direct air capture, I think most predictions indicate that we might be able to achieve that in the late 30s. I think for others like enhanced weathering, the potential is much quicker. And that's generally a function of, how long it takes to scale those methods to a certain volumes. It's usually much easier to get to cheaper price once we can scale to larger volumes.
Got it. It's interesting to learn about this, evolving, not only evolving technologies, but an entire evolving market. So when we talk about prices in the CDR market, like what does this actually mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good question. And for this, I'm going to share an additional set of data that I have here, because indeed, some people will read in the news, for example, direct air capture costs $600 per ton. And what does that actually mean? And generally, that refers to the cost of capture and of removal of the CO2 that is really being done by the projects. And so here we have a breakdown that really depends again on which projects we're considering, which removal pathways, but we break down here the typical costs of what it means. And I think generally what we're seeing is the capital expenditures of those projects will generally be 20 to 40% of that cost. The operating expenditure generally 30 to 50%, again, depending on the pathways. And then the rest will be, between the, actually verifying that this is done properly and adding a margin from the suppliers as well. That's highly dependent again on the projects and on the removal pathways. So yeah, generally it refers to cost of capture removal plus a margin from the suppliers.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the things that are driving such large price differences in the market, even within one, individual removal pathway?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because you're seeing that, between those different removal pathways, the gap is very wide. But as you mentioned, even within one specific removal pathways, you can see huge gaps. And it can be very confusing for, I think, people that are entering the market or looking at this, in the first time, because most of the time we're not comparing really apples to apples. And I think
Okay.
here, some of the key drivers that we've highlighted here is, of course, as I was just saying, the removal pathways, if you're doing direct air capture or, biochar, we're here on complete different dynamics, so you should expect very, very different prices. But the next one is, I think, what drives most of the difference within one of the same removal pathways, and it's mainly due with project's maturity and scale. So if we're taking, for example, direct air capture, you have projects that have been doing this since already 5 to 10 years. You have projects that are starting, on in the last couple of years. And so depending on the maturity and how much scale they can have, you will see a really wide variety of prices. The location where they do it also can be a major factor. I think especially projects that are doing it in global south, especially with the biomass, can typically achieve more interesting prices. And lastly, I think technological efficiency, and that's mainly for the more technological pathways like DAC or some of the ocean one, that can also have a pretty big impact on prices.
Okay. That gives a lot more data into why there would be such price differences. Thank you. So if I'm just, I don't know, hypothetical, so DAC means direct air capture, right? So if
Yes.
I'm getting a DAC at, for example, $500 a ton, what does that actually mean?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's also the main point that I wanted to make initially is, in the absence of a spot market at the moment, it's very difficult to compare. So if you're saying I'm getting $500 for a DAC, if you really want to be precise, you should look at what vintage does it refer to? How far ahead is the projects? And if you want to compare projects within each other, you have to go within all those individual criteria to make a fair comparison. And then lastly, I think there's also the terms of the contract. So for example, people will read some prices in news saying this company has secured, I don't know, $800 per ton or $1,000 per ton for that specific projects or technology. But that's generally very dependent on the volumes that they're contracting and some of the terms of the contracts, which can have huge implication and which also makes it more difficult to kind of get a clear picture. So I think comparing those details with each other give actually a fair comparison and really, ensure that we're comparing apples to apples.
You just mentioned the difficulty of getting a clear picture. So what would you say some of the reasons are that it's not that easy to get a clear view on the pricing ecosystem?
Yeah. I think one part is, since it's a futures market, again, it's very difficult to compare apples to apples because you need that level of details to make a fair comparisons. And I think the next one is also the level of transparency is usually difficult to get because those are typically private contracts. So sometimes they're being shared, but sometimes they're not. So what we really try to do at Carbonex is, through all of our discussion with suppliers, through all of our market data that we collect, is try to bring transparency on that market that's at the moment, first of all, illiquid, a future one, and with low transparency, which makes it very difficult to have benchmarks and also have, as I was saying, like one price for one technology or like a removal pathway.
Thank you. What are some things companies can do to get more clarity and more of a transparent view on CDR prices?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think engaging early in this market is always a good thing to do, just to learn, educate themselves, understand the dynamics that are going on. At Carbonix, we're also trying to put all of our data public on our websites, which can be very helpful to kind of get a quick grasp of where it stands. We don't disclose any of the suppliers because we usually under NDA with them, but it still gives a picture of what the market looks like. And then I would say, to engage with the ecosystem, I think one thing we've noticed in the ecosystem is that there's a lot of willingness to collaborate, to spend time, and so with actors like Carbonix, but there's others as well. I think that try to bring more transparency, and I think that's probably something that I would encourage companies to do rather early than later.
Excellent. It's part of a huge macro trend that I've been seeing for a long time, and that's, I think, is exciting, where when we start having a common goal because we all care about the same thing, you get a little bit more collaborative, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I have to say, I've been working before in more mature industries, and here seeing the collaboration willingness from the CDR industry. I've never seen that in other industries. So I think this is really a time that we can, that, you know, that's where that's the case. Whether that's going to remain over time, I don't know, but for sure, I think that's really great to see, at least for now.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sebastien. I'm happy to be doing this show with you and Paolo. And for anyone listening, if this is interesting to you or you know anyone else that you think needs to know about this, please help us share the show, share the reports. We're going to be doing these every 2 weeks. And if you have feedback or ideas, any kind of comments, questions, we would really love if you reach out. And you can do that at contact@carbonex.world. Sebastien,
Thank you
thanks for
very
being
much,
here.
Eli. Thank you.
See you soon.